The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast. I'm Mandra Bisgrenay, and I believe everyone has a story to tell. What's yours?
Deborah Monk, empowering you to find your creative voice.
And Shelley Devlin, inspiring you to find your why.
We have a great show for you today. We have a guest joining us, Mary Vensel White. She is an author, teacher, and editor. Mary's writing has appeared in Catapult, Medium, The Rumpus, the Madison Review, the Wisconsin Review, and many others. She's a contributing editor at litchat.com and owner of type18editing.com. Her debut novel, The Qualities of Wood, was the first book published under HarperCollins' Autonomy imprint. A second novel, Bellflower, was published in February 2019. Mary lives in Southern California with her 4 children. And Mary, we are so happy for you to be here on this early hour from where you are. And wow, 4 kids.
Yeah, triplets.
Plus 1.
That's right. Yes.
That's 4.
I think they're all here tonight. It's hard to keep track of them. They're all teenagers now. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So Shelley, you met Mary.
I did meet Mary on the Right on the Beach retreat in North Carolina, and it was such a great network. You know, not only did Mary was definitely the one that was in her room nonstop. She was like the A scholar student there that weekend. You know, she was powering through. Like she'd come up from her room and grab like a piece of lettuce and then go back in.
About that. I think I actually gained weight there, but that's okay. You know why? We talk about the teens, and since I've been home, nothing. I've got nothing done on the writing front. So other things, you know, kind of businessy writing things, but I haven't worked on the book at all. Well, a tiny bit, but that's why retreats are so great, right?
That's true. You get a lot of work done.
Yeah, and so Mary, talk about that a little bit. Talk about where and how you find the time, and a little bit about your writing process, because I know we all struggle with that.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, we all go through different phases. I mean, certainly when my kids were small for many, many years, I didn't write at all. I've always been a big reader, and I always feel like I've always kept that up, that part of it. I wouldn't, you know, we just talked about that. I don't know that I have a process, but when I am writing, I'm pretty much in it, you know, up in the morning, can pretty much write, you know, goes fast once you get going. It's like a lot of things we don't do, right? Exercise. Once you do it, you're like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. But I have a hard time finding time now with the teaching and some other things I do with my local writers. You know, we all have fingers in many, many pies. So I don't know. I'm struggling to find it now. I certainly don't have much of an excuse anymore where the kids are concerned because, you know, they're bigger. They don't really need or want much from you. But I sure find lots of ways not to do it still. It's the house, I think. I'm starting to think, because I do have a lot of time to myself now in the house, but there's always there's the dogs, there's laundry. I don't know. I mean, I struggle with it too. So I have no great
No, but that, you know what? That's refreshing, because even with 2 novels and all the other things that you do,
it's real.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
The struggle is real.
Yeah.
So, Mary, how many retreats have you been to?
Well, I've taken single retreats by myself when the kids were smaller, go off to basically a hotel for a couple nights. I tried to do an Airbnb once over in Joshua Tree, and a mouse ran out. So I realized at that point, I'm a hotel person. So my typical retreat is by myself would be go to a hotel for 2 or 3 days. And it's amazing. You know, I used to wonder, because I always thought I was a morning writer. I thought, well, how long can you write, right? Because it's exhausting. And I thought, am I just going to burn out at noon and then just have to watch TV? But you can go when there's no laundry, there's nothing else to do. You know, it's so productive. I may not finish my book till next year if we do the retreat again. I don't know.
So how many times would you say you've done this? Do you do it every 3 months, once a year?
Over the last 8 years, I went on that retreat that Shelley and I were at, and maybe 3 times just myself.
Yeah.
But up until recently, I didn't work outside the home, so I have time here. But again, I don't always utilize it.
Lately, I've had the urge to get one, to put a stick over my back with one of those bandanas tied like Huckleberry Finn and just run away.
Right?
Yes, I have a 3-ring binder with an idea, and I've been putting notes in it. I thought I just want me and that binder to drive a couple hours away and literally feel like I'm running away. But I haven't done it because I'm afraid I'll just spend an hour and then go swim and then go have a martini. But what's the point of that?
That's where the guilt comes in, because we're all kind of conditioned to feel guilty if we take time for ourselves, even if it's for our, profession, but you would get it done. Even one night is so much time, without the house and all the things you have to do.
Right. It's just carving out that time, that kind of sacred space. I'd like to talk a little bit about your editing business and tell us more about that and some of the things that you see as an editor, because a lot of our listeners are beginner writers, and I think that would be great information for them.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about it, and I think I can kind of summarize the 2 biggest things I see across the board, not only in my editing, but I'm also a reader for a literary journal, so I'm reading a lot of first pages now, and that's so helpful. And if you can't be a reader or you don't want to be an editor, joining groups and reading other people's stuff is so helpful, for that, because sometimes you hear things and it doesn't sink in. I remember hearing, agents don't want to see things that open up when people wake up in the morning. And I remember at the time thinking, well, what's the big deal? Who cares? Well, after you read 40 of those, you get it. And you're like, oh, I get it. We're tired of this. So I think the 2 main problems that beginning writers do, the first one I would say falls under kind of a category, I would say point of view and voice. Point of view, of course, how you choose to write it, first person, second person, third person, limited or omniscient. But it's not just choosing the voice, because you can do whatever you want, right? Anything can work. It's just consistency within that voice. As an editor, I make a lot of notes on the side that are like, okay, wait, who's this speaking? Where did this perspective come in? Or how would he know that? Because, we have the story all in our heads, and sometimes we'll throw something in where the reader knows right away, wait, he shouldn't know that yet, or why is he thinking that? That doesn't make sense. So really, it has a lot to do with consistency. Does the character know things that are appropriate for his age and his history, all that kind of thing. And like I talked about, not having that narrator intrusion. And again, you can do whatever you want. You can have a first-person book, and maybe at the beginning of each section, you want to have an omniscient historical thing. Like, anything can work, but it's that consistency. The other thing would be probably voice. And when I say voice, I'm talking about things like consistency, but also style. And even amongst like the writer's voice, that's kind of, it's one of those things, it's like pornography, when you see it. When I'm reading for the literary journal, that's really the main thing I'm wanting, is to, from the first few sentences, feel like, oh, and we've all been there, right? You open a book and the first page, you're like, okay, I'm going to settle in. This is a voice that I want to listen to. This author feels like she or he knows what she's doing, knows what she's saying. And readers want to trust that, and they want to feel like, I want to hear what this person has to say. And in order to do that, that voice has to be consistent too, So voice, point of view, just being not only factual, but consistent and believable, true. The other main thing I think beginning writers do is, and it's kind of a more superficial thing, is overwriting. That for sure. Too much description, too much narration, too much backstory early on. We've all heard that. Duplicating things, like telling us something before dialogue that we're going to see in dialogue. Telling us something after dialogue that we just saw in dialogue. Karen stormed out of the room and said, "I'm so angry at you." And then the next paragraph, Karen was so angry. And, as a reader, you're thinking, yeah, I just saw that, It's not about showing or telling. It's just because both there's a time and place for it both, but just duplicating things, overwriting. And I think we may have talked about this at the retreat, how, when you're writing fiction, it can take you 2 hours to write 2 pages, right? So sometimes at the end of the second page, you remind the reader of something. Well, then later when you go back to reread it, it goes really fast and you think, oh, well, I didn't need to remind them. It took me 2 hours to get there, but it took them 5 minutes to get there, So yeah, those two things, just the overwriting, too much what they call purple prose, trying to do too much with language. And again, there's all different kinds of styles, but you think of it like as a party. You go talk to someone at a party and some people are just tiring and you don't want to be that annoying person at your book party, So, and there's all different styles, but just, overdoing it, oversaying, telling too much of the story early on, all that kind of stuff.
Do you all want to go back and read your first page again? Because I want to go back and read my first page. I didn't think about that. She's read so many first pages that I want to go back and read my first page.
And make sure.
I don't know. Do I start in the morning? Does it start does it sound boring? Does it make you want to sit down?
Guess how Julia Stone starts? My first novel starts with she's waking up. And I'm thinking, I never heard that. You're not supposed to start that way. But thinking back, I think that she wakes up interesting enough that it's okay.
She does.
Yeah.
She definitely does.
Yeah. But that's kind of
the thing about writing rules, or anytime you go to a conference or you read a book or whatever, there's rules, and then there's all the things that didn't follow them that worked really well. So
I just wrote down a note that we should do a show on how to break the rules, but how important it is. You can only break rules that you know what they are, because then you can know why you're breaking them and you can break them effectively. So we're going to add a show. We're going to do a show about that. So I completely agree with you. When you say voice, we all hear that word and we all search to try to make sure that we have our own voice. I recently heard Neil Gaiman say that he went back, I don't know how old he is now, 40 or 50, and he went back into his attic and he found a story that he wrote when he was 20. And he said, the story really did stink, and I'm glad I never tried to do anything with it. But he said, you could still tell it was Neil Gaiman writing. I just wasn't a very good writer then. And so he was saying that your voice will become apparent through the writing, that's really the only way to find your voice. And I had never heard that had said that way before. I'd always heard that you have to find your voice. And what he was saying is you don't have to find it. You just have to write enough that it becomes apparent what your voice is.
Yeah.
Do you have any tricks for finding your voice quicker?
Well, I think about this quite a bit. And again, it's with the reading with the journal and editing work that I do, and interactions I've had with writers that trying to help guide them. Another thing you see a lot with short stories and things I read for the journal is, somebody has a great idea. Hey, I have a quirky idea for a story. What if this happens and then this happens? And oh my gosh, it's so clever. And it is. Or I have a great idea for a character. What if this woman, I'm very character driven, so that's where a lot of my things start. Well, what if this woman, this happened to her, and this is what type of woman she is and how she feels and all that. And they have these great ideas. And a writer friend of mine pretty recently was telling me a lot of her stories. She was getting feedback where they talked about context. And she said, I'm trying to figure out what that means, context. And then I started reading for the journal, and all of a sudden it kind of clicked with me. The context is what do you have in the game? What skin do you have in the game? Because you can have a great quirky story, you can have a great character, but unless you're feeling something about it, and you have something from yourself to put into the story. And I think if you focus on trying to do that, then that's your voice. It'll come out. And I think context, I read a lot of stories where I think, this was good. It was really well written. I like the story. I like the arc of it, but I don't know why this matters. Why do we care about this woman? Why do we care that this happened to her?
So when you say what's
a good idea, it's quirky. And I think that, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that, I don't know for sure, but I'm starting to think that the way you find that is by wondering what kind of connection it has for you. The novel I'm working on right now is a YA novel, and I was working on it at the retreat, and I told everyone there I had started writing it a few years ago, and it kind of stalled out for several reasons. It had tons of things going on. I was trying to be too smarty pants, I think. And I think also I've come to realize I didn't have any skin in the game. I was trying to do all these great ideas, and none of it really meant that much to me. I hadn't really connected with the character. So when I got back to it and I started just kind of taking walks and thinking, like, what does this book mean to me? Does it mean anything? Because if it doesn't, then maybe I shouldn't write it. And then all of a sudden it kind of clicked on me what her journey was going to be, how that relates to me and my journey right now. And since then, it just everything, fell into place. And I think voice is things like style, for sure. I mean, there's, practical things you can work on as far as, on the sentence level and all that. But I do think voice is going to start with how the story relates to you. What are you feeling about it? What are you trying to say? Why are you the only person that has to tell this story? Why do you have to tell it? Because there's stories have all been told over and over again, right? So what can you bring to the table?
So when you say what skin do you have in the game, you mean what skin does the author have in the game, not the main character?
The author, which is going to project through the characters, through all the characters, but mainly the character,
Would you be comfortable sharing with us what you found out your skin in the game with your YA adult is? What your YA novel?
Sure. Yeah, I think my novel's about a young girl, and it's not finished, so I don't even for sure know for sure exactly how this is going to work out, but she has a condition that's a medical condition that's going to be degenerative. And she's 18, so she doesn't care. She kind of doesn't care. She kind of doesn't want to deal with it. She doesn't think it's as serious as her parents think. That's how teens are, I can attest. But her parents are really worried. And, I knew she was going to kind of go on a road trip, and her dad's missing. And I knew there was going to be a romance, but she's got to have some kind of journey, some kind of arc. So my way in was I've had a rough couple of years with some personal losses and a divorce and stuff. So I was thinking about, making yourself vulnerable after, painful experiences and being able to open back up. And I realized that Tuesday, that's her name, Tuesday's journey is part of the reason she's so, not wanting to confront it is because of this thing in her where she's afraid to be vulnerable and afraid to kind of admit. And so that's going to be kind of her journey, being able to open up and let people come in and kind of help her. And again, I'm halfway through, so we'll see how it works out. But that's kind of my emotional connection at this point with her.
Interesting. So, and you're saying that that's something that you're working on personally about being being willing to be vulnerable?
Yeah, I think so.
So you're a woman, a middle-aged woman dealing with vulnerability, and you're going to express that through this 18-year-old who's been diagnosed with a degenerative disease. So how your character doesn't have to be, if you're a middle-aged woman going through a divorce, you don't have to write a middle-aged character going through divorce. You can, and I think it makes it more, I would think, as you're saying this, I think that was brilliant advice. And personally, I thank you for it. I would think it would almost be easier to express it through a character very different from yourself.
But but I find too that one of the fun things about writing, I've never thought I would write YA. I never, but one of the fun things about it is that you do kind of go back to early Mary. Like now I'm writing it in so at any phase of your life, I don't know. When I was younger, a lot of things I would write, people would say, "Oh, I didn't realize you were so young. You sound like a middle-aged woman," and now I'm writing this YA. So
that's funny.
I don't know, but it's kind of exciting to write as a kid because if you remember, everything's so wide open, that feeling you go out at night, oh my gosh, anything could happen. Well, now we go out, we're like, I'm going to have a glass of wine, I'm going to come home at 9, But kids are like, oh my gosh, anything, the possibility, but also the fear and the unknown. And, but yeah, I think though the feeling part of it, feelings are pretty universal. One way. I think vulnerability could, go up to later in life when you're nearing the end or even like a small child. I mean, that's something that most feelings can translate to almost anyone if we think about it,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think I've never heard it put so well, actually. I think that is so really brilliantly said. And I don't say that lightly. You guys know.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
When she was speaking, I totally was thinking about you and your book that you want to put back in the drawer. Or maybe you
good
put it
God.
back in the drawer.
Oh, yes.
Because of all that, because of pulling the curtains back. I mean, that's memoir. So that's you. You are the character.
I know, but
This is when she doesn't want to talk about it, Mary.
Yeah, let's
she
not
doesn't
make
want to
this
talk
about me.
it. She doesn't want to talk about it.
What is so great is that everything that Mary has said, but back up to the point of view and voice, spoke to really having the reader be able to trust the author, right? And now with the vulnerability, it's also the authenticity of the author. So it's again,
Right.
It's the relationship between the reader and the author, and having those, be a trusting and honest conversation that makes a really good story.
well, and I think I never would have put it this way until what Mary said, but we've all heard you have to care about your characters, or as a writer, you're not going to live with them for 2 years. But I think that's so surface to say. I think it's not really so much caring about the character specifically, because at the end of the day, they're really not real. It's about caring, do they resolve the question or the issue that I'm actually personally trying to resolve myself? I think that was great.
And how they get there.
And how they get there. And then there's the hope that they can get there. And that you can, as the author, you can experience that through your character, even if you don't get to do it in your own life.
And I should say too, sometimes now I hear you speaking about the process, it makes it sound like it always has to be a very conscious, choice. I'm going to now explore my vulnerability. That's kind of how it worked out for me a little bit with this one, because I was struggling with the book. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Why am I writing this? But I think a lot of times the process, it just happens. It does. I look back at my first novel, which I don't like to do very much. I mean, I'm very proud of it, but I wrote it a long time ago. And, now when you look at it, you're like, ugh. But I read it now and I see I'm in all the characters, and I wouldn't have realized that at the time I was writing it, and now you go back and you're like, oh, that's a little bit my grandma, but yet I do that. And, I think a lot of times this process sort of happens anyway, and you don't even make sense of maybe what some of the themes are until after you're done. And that's kind of a funner way to do it, But because I was struggling with this book.
I completely agree. My 2 novels, I didn't know what it was about until it was done. And then I can say, oh yeah, boy, that is an issue I'm trying to deal with in life, and I can see. And that's why I do care about those 2 books so much.
Right.
So yeah. I didn't plan it, but I did do it.
Right.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to sit down and say,
this is what I'm doing.
It's lacking. One of the clients I had, I don't want to, whatever, but one of his things was I felt like he was completely out of the story. Super smart guy, great writer, but I was like, I need, not feeling what is it to you? What is the story to you? And if he could infuse that, then it would just take off,
So you guys are going to have to meet Mary, because we're going to do another Right on the Beach retreat. And we both emailed our Dawn from Rewired Creatives this morning and both said, we're in.
I know. I think
really quick.
I think if Mandra and I add in, it'll be practically full.
Right? Mary, where is the best place for people to find you?
I think everything's pretty much linked through my author site, which is maryvenselwhite.com.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Feel creative. I'm actually right today, ladies.
Woo! Yay! Well, that's what we hope to do. Thank you so much for getting up early and for coming on and putting things so well in such a way that we hadn't put that way before.
Right.
So that was wonderful. If people want to head on over to it's your author page, Mary Vensel White. You can take a look at, again, her 2 novels. And thank you again for listening. Please be sure to check out the Writer's Block NH Facebook and the Writer's Block podcast on your favorite podcast catcher. If you'd like to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, you can head on over to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. Thank you for listening. We hope to inspire and empower you to tell your own story.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.